Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Our first presentation for the day will reveal some valuable insights and a marketer's guide on privacy, consent, and personalization in the modern privacy era. This session is brought by a certified information privacy professional and a marketing offering manager at OneTrust, Zachary Faruque. Zachary advises companies on best practices to drive engaging user experiences and build trust while demonstrating compliance across hundreds of global data privacy regulations. Welcome, Zachary. Great to have you.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and
Good
welcome,
morning.
everyone.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Aziza. I apologize, I am having some issues with my audio, but hopefully you can all hear me okay.
Oh, we can hear you perfectly well now. Good luck.
Fantastic. And with that, we will get started. Thank you for joining this session. We've got about 20 minutes, and we'll be talking about privacy, consent, and personalization in the modern privacy era. Just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Zachary Faruque. I'm an offering manager here at OneTrust, and I'm responsible for our consent and preference management products. I do hold both my CIPE and CIPM, both of those with the International Association of Privacy Professionals as well. Without further ado, though, let's get into it. And what I wanted to start with was a bit of a sort of step back to give some context to the conversation that we're going to have today. And really, first and foremost, I wanted to call out that privacy, and more broadly, trust really, is a competitive differentiator today. Now, no one does this better than Apple at the moment, certainly from a marketing perspective. And I know this could be quite a controversial slide. There are many of us that agree with some of the things that Apple are doing in regards to consent pop-ups and privacy changes, and there's others that sit on the other side of the fence. But what there is no doubt about is that Apple spends a lot of money on marketing to let their consumers know and prospects know that they care about their privacy. Now, the reason we're seeing this shift in consumer expectations and ultimately this change in privacy becoming a competitive differentiator for brands is really threefold. There are, of course, the privacy regulations that are making a huge amount of difference. And if we think about probably our first interaction as consumers, really started in Europe back in 2002 with the creation of the cookie banner. And that was the e-privacy directive that brought us that. But then, of course, since then, we've had the behemoth that was GDPR 2015, 2018, and then a sort of avalanche of regulations since then that are, of course, very hard for us all to keep up with it, whether we're talking about the CCPA in California, CASL in Canada, LGPD in Brazil, POPIA in South Africa, PDPL in Saudi Arabia. Really, we're at a point where you can pick any four-letter acronyms, and I'm pretty sure there's either a privacy regulation out there today or certainly one coming in the near future. So it's imperative as businesses we keep a keen eye and watch on these regulations because obviously they have operational impact to us. But alongside those regulations, we also see frameworks. Some of you might be aware of the IAB's Transparency and Consent Framework that was created to support the ad tech ecosystem and ensuring that we could propagate consent throughout that ecosystem online for consumers. And then beyond even these frameworks, what we're now seeing are the big tech companies predominantly making big changes to their technology stacks that has a huge knock-on impact to all of us as brands and marketers. I've mentioned Apple already, but the changes back in iOS 14 with the consent pop-up to access the identifier for advertisers, the nutrition labels that have been introduced into the App Store. So apps now have to be much more transparent about the privacy data sharing that they're doing, data collecting in the apps. We're seeing Google with Android, the AAID doing a very similar thing. And of course, we also have the great cookie crumble. The impending doom of the third-party cookie was set for 2021. Google have since pushed that to 2023. But a massive knock-on impact, especially to the ad tech ecosystem, but from an advertiser's perspective, from a brand's perspective, how we retarget, how we remarket to individuals and consumers that have been on on our digital properties is going to change forever. But all of this comes also under much greater social media and wider publishing media awareness. That's not just because of the data breaches. It's pretty much every week, if not every month, that there's a new data breach or a new headline about a regulatory fine for one of the for businesses around the world. But we're also seeing things like the social dilemma on Netflix. And so that younger generation, the Gen Zs, are being brought up much more aware of their digital footprint, what data is being captured on them throughout the digital ecosystem, how that's being shared and monetized, often without their knowledge or consent. So the consumer expectations are ultimately changing because of much greater awareness and knowledge of the ecosystem itself. What does this all mean, though? Sorry, before I get onto that, don't take it from me. Here is some research by Forrester and actually some comments direct from consumers as part of that research in regards to hashtag creepy marketing, as it's now being called. Those ways that we're tracking users across the web, often without their knowledge. So I'll leave this up for a couple of seconds for everyone to have a read. But I thought some really, really interesting comments in this, particularly the one around a disabled child. From a moral standpoint, not just letter of the law, this is something we cannot be tied to. It cannot be part of our brand purposes and drives. So they are practices that we all need to address. So what does this mean? It means that trust and transparency is ultimately now the icing on the cake. Where in the 80s we were talking about bang for buck, price and quality, we then saw the rise of the Net Promoter Score, customer effort score, and customer engagement became the icing on the cake. All of those things are still very much important to consumers, but the real icing on the cake now moving forwards are trust and transparency. And so this has a new huge knock-on effect to specifically the digital experiences for consumers, how we approach and address engaging and personalizing those experiences in the digital ecosystem for our consumers. And so where previously we've been very reactive to legislations, we now need to be getting ahead of the game and getting processes, solutions, vendors, technology in place to ensure that we can be proactive and not need to constantly hit a red button to readdress introductions to new regulations, where we've currently got a huge amount of revenue risk in regards to reliance on third-party data, third-party aggregators that rely on cookies that are ultimately being deprecated. We need to move to a more consistent user experience, and that can be a much improved user experience that traverses across channels, seamless from mobile app to website, to in-person, to point of sale, to contact center. And so there's a lot we can be doing now. This is ultimately a fantastic opportunity for us all to reset, hit the reset button, and start building privacy-centric experiences for our consumers that still drive loyalty and provide personalization at every touch point. Now, how do we go about this, and what does success mean in order to achieve it? Well, I wanted to start with success. And yes, of course, the first case in point is going to be drastically reducing our regulatory risk from a success point. But what are some of the wider KPIs, performance metrics that we can focus on and expect from implementing a first-class consent and preference management strategy and program? Well, we should be seeing a massive increase to our marketing database. The marketable universe that we have will massively increase because people will no longer be opting out. They'll be opting down with those personalized choices with regards to preference management. We'll have richer, wholly owned first-party data sets that we're not reliant on third parties or third-party aggregators to providers as a business. We're going to be able to improve the customer experience because we're going to be transparent with them. We're going to give them choice over how we communicate, when we communicate, what information, what products, what categories are they interested in. And that's ultimately going to drive increased marketing results if we think about conversion KPIs. If we're sending communications to individuals on products and categories that they care about, then of course we're going to see much higher conversion. We can also leverage this technology to reduce operational burdens. We don't need batch processors. We don't need to wait for someone to do an export import to keep our wider technology stack in sync. And probably most importantly is that this isn't something that only marketers can address. Our governance teams, our privacy teams, our legal teams, our enterprise architecture teams all have a hand in this, and we need to work together. So consent and preferences gives us a brilliant opportunity to blue sky strategize and solve all of the problems across those departments, led by the marketers, to improve the business processes overall. And so when we think about this consent and preference management strategy, really there are three key areas we want to be thinking about today. How can we enhance our data collection? How can we improve our strategy and become less reliant on third-party data? How can we leverage technology to ensure that governance rules are in place? If someone has opted out of marketing communications, does the marketing automation tool need any of that individual's personal information? Or if they've opted out of analytics or profiling, we need to tokenize in the MDM system or data lakes, or even prevent that data ever entering there until we have that consent from the individual. And then probably most importantly, we need to think about how we're transparent about how we're using our data or our consumers' data with them. And so if we look at each of these points in a little bit more detail, when we start thinking about the strategy and how we interact with our consumers, well, quite often our very first interaction is going to be a privacy interaction. It will be our cookie banner on our website. And so already the consumer is making choices, giving us preferences in regards to how they want the relationship to begin. But then over time, maybe they navigate through a few pages, they see a product they're interested in, maybe they subscribe to our newsletter or they download our mobile app, we send them marketing communications, they call up our contact center. All of these different touch points need to be in sync, and we need to think about when is it contextually relevant to ask for information from a consumer. And one of the best examples I can give of this is something that I encountered coming up to a year ago now. It was about December time last year. I'm based in the UK and we were just coming out of lockdown, but retail hadn't opened yet. All of retail was closed. And actually my girlfriend at the time, bit of a spoiler alert there, moved in with me just before we went into lockdown. And we'd got through about a year of lockdown, and I thought, well, hey, if we can survive a year of lockdown, this is definitely the person that I want to spend the rest of my life with. So I decided that I wanted to propose. Now the challenge becomes, the first thing you need when you want to propose is an engagement ring. In a normal world without COVID, I would have said I'm off to golf or off to the gym or off for a drink with my friends, and I'd have nipped down to the nearest jewelers and started looking. But that wasn't available to me. My only choice was to go online. But my concern with my ad tech ecosystem and development background was that the minute I go online, my other half would come back from work and instantly get spammed with ads for engagement rings. And one of the biggest, best surprises, we certainly hope, of our lives would have been ruined. I sat back and thought, this is crazy. The very brands, the very jewelers that are looking for my custom to engage with me in a relationship are disincentivizing me to visit their online presence, their websites, because of the privacy practices that are going on. Now, of course, I had no choice. I had to go the usual stuff, VPN, incognito mode, +1 if I had a cookie banner. But that experience could have been very different. Each touch point, we can think outside of the box. Rather than throw a cookie banner up, why not ask me if I'm looking for an engagement ring or a surprise gift? I'd have said yes. And they could have said, your secret's safe with me. Your secret's safe with us. We won't track you. There won't be any personalized or targeted advertising. down the line on social media, but we would like to offer you discounts on some of the products you look at today. If you'd like to receive these, please put in your email address. Now, within 30 seconds, I would have embarked on a relationship with that business. Can you imagine what their marketable database would look like if they'd taken that approach and engaged me as a human being rather than just seeing me as a click or a conversion or an IP address with the tracking technologies and retargeting that goes on? So it's really important that we think about, when we think about these touch points and we come up with this first party data strategy, we think about the human being on the other side of the computer and not just a click or a conversion. Now, we are running short on time, so I will speed up now. One of the most common questions I get when talking to customers and partners around the world is in regards to what valid consent looks like. And so often, as I speak to businesses, they will say, we've got consent all sorted out. And I'll say, well, what does that look like? And in their CRM, they've got an email address, they've got a timestamp, and then they've got a flag. It might be a 1 or a 0 or a yes or a no for marketing communications. Now, if a consumer calls up and says, why are you sending me marketing communications? And you respond to them saying, well, we're sending you marketing communications because we turned a 0 to a 1 on this date and time. That tells that consumer absolutely nothing. It is not transparent, nor does it prove that you received consent. Likewise, with a supervisory authority, if you get audited, that doesn't prove you have consent. So I think it's really important for us as marketers to know and understand that actually to be able to prove consent, there's a lot more information that we need. We need to know how and when they consented. Was it online? Was it via a web form? What was the wording? Because consent needs to be granular and informed. And so when they provide consent, we need to be able to say, here was the guise under which you provided that consent. Terms and conditions, privacy policies, we also need to be able to track the version of those as well. So really important to think of consent as much, much more than just a flag. A flag is not enough. It's not enough for consumers, and it's not enough for supervisory authorities. The other thing I wanted to touch on is the importance of leveraging technology for good. So how do we ensure we have real-time event-driven integrations with the wider technology stack that we use? And your consent and preference management system can help you orchestrate all of this and federate the information downstream to those systems. The very last point I wanted to touch on is in regards to transparency for consumers. As we capture data from consumers across all of these different touch points, it's really important that we give them access to that data. Give them a one-stop hub that they can go to and see all the data we've captured, the privacy policies, terms and conditions. And that can all be done via the Preference Center. Preference Centers aren't just about unsubscribing from marketing communications. And with that, I will wrap up and say thank you all very much for listening to me today. If you do have any questions, feel free to get in touch, and you can head over to the preferencechoice.com website for more information as well.
Thank you so much, Zachary, for that insightful session. And I think definitely marketers need to be up to date with the compliances. And I'm sure that our viewers, they've got some great pointers on how to build trust with their clients while also collect first-party data. Thanks again.